This beggar girl saves a millionaire from being torched by bikers, but shockingly, moments later, comment giving my story a score from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The girl's scream sliced through the muggy air of the alley like a knife, echoing between the brick walls of a small downtown in Savannah, Georgia. Kevin Sterling, 30 years old, felt gasoline trickling through his dark hair as 5 bikers surrounded him, their faces hidden by dirty helmets that reflected the dim light of the late Georgian afternoon. The acrid smell of fuel mixed with the cold sweat running down his back, and the businessman, owner of Sterling Construction, knew he had mere seconds between him and a situation that could change his life forever. The debt of Tony, his partner who'd vanished months ago, had finally caught up to him in a brutal and definitive way. The loan sharks in the area weren't interested in explanations or justifications, only in the payment of the accumulated interest that reached an astronomical amount in dollars. Kevin had assumed all the company's financial responsibilities after Tony's sudden disappearance, believing wholeheartedly in the official version that his business partner had lost his life in a traffic accident on a back road between Georgia and Florida. Now, surrounded by the men who demanded payment of a debt that wasn't his, he understood he'd been masterfully deceived. The group's leader, a burly man with tattoos covering his muscular arms, held a match between his fingers as he spoke in a hoarse voice about consequences and examples that needed to be set for other debtors in the area. Kevin tried to negotiate, offering deadlines and guarantees, but his words were lost in the warm wind blowing between the low buildings of downtown. It was in this moment of absolute despair that a small figure came running through the alley, screaming with all the strength of her small lungs. Lily, a 4-year-old girl who looked only 2 due to the severe malnutrition that marked her thin face, threw herself between Kevin and the men just as the match was lit. The distraction caused by the child's unexpected appearance created the chaos needed for Kevin to push the nearest man and run towards the alley's exit, carrying Lily in his arms while shouts of fury echoed behind them. The girl had been hurt during the tumult. Her small hands were burned by the match that had fallen on her during the confusion, but her big, dark eyes shone with a surprising intelligence for someone her age. Kevin ran through the narrow streets of Savannah carrying the little girl, his heart pounding erratically as he looked for a safe place where they could hide from their pursuers. The gratitude he felt for the inexplicable courage of that unknown child mixed with a deep guilt as he saw the burns on her delicate little hands. During the desperate escape through the busy streets of the city, Kevin couldn't stop thinking about how such a small girl had had the courage to put herself in danger to save a complete stranger. Lily remained silent in his arms, just watching everything around her with those eyes that seemed to hold secrets too big for someone her age. When they finally found refuge in a pharmacy in the business district, Kevin could better examine the girl's injuries and was shocked by her general state of neglect and malnutrition. Her clothes were dirty rags that barely covered her frail body. Her hair was dry and full of knots, and there was an ancient sadness in her gaze that contrasted drastically with the courage she had demonstrated in the alley. The pharmacist, an elderly man who knew Kevin from when his construction company had renovated the establishment, offered first aid to Lily while asking questions about the origin of that clearly homeless child. Kevin realized at that moment that he knew absolutely nothing about the girl who had saved his life, not even her name, which he discovered when she whispered timidly when questioned by the pharmacist. The discovery that Lily had been living alone on the streets for months, surviving on scraps of food and the occasional kindness of strangers, awakened in Kevin a protective feeling that he hadn't experienced in years. His life had become a mechanical routine of work, social commitments, and a relationship with Ashley, his lawyer fiancée, which seemed more like a business partnership than a union based on genuine love. The presence of that fragile and courageous girl stirred something deep inside him, a part of his humanity that had been gradually stifled by the financial pressures and ambitions that had dominated his existence in recent years. While watching Lily receive basic medical care, Kevin made a decision that would completely change the course of his life. He would take the girl home and ensure she received all the necessary treatment to recover from the burns and the difficult life on the streets. He couldn't rationally explain this decision. He just felt he owed it to her and perhaps to himself as well. Night had fallen on Savannah when Kevin finally arrived at his mansion in the city's upscale neighborhood, carrying Lily, who had fallen asleep in his arms during the car ride. The luxurious house, with its manicured gardens and modern architecture, contrasted brutally with the reality from which the girl came, and Kevin wondered for the first time if all that wealth in property and assets really had any meaning in the face of the courage and purity of that child who had saved his life. Ashley Bennett's reaction was even worse than Kevin had imagined. The 28-year-old lawyer arrived at the mansion the next morning and found Lily sitting at the breakfast table wearing one of Kevin's shirts that served as a dress on the scrawny girl. Ashley's brown eyes narrowed at the scene, and her voice took on that icy tone that Kevin knew well from the courtrooms where she practiced. She demanded an immediate explanation about the presence of that dirty child in her future home, and when Kevin told her about the previous day's events, her reaction was one of pure indignation. Ashley argued that they couldn't just adopt a street girl as if she were an abandoned animal, especially considering the financial problems they already faced because of Tony's disappearance. Their plans for a luxurious wedding, the party for 300 guests at the best hotel in Savannah, everything was threatened by the construction company's crisis, and now Kevin wanted to add another responsibility to the already complicated situation. The discussion intensified when Ashley mentioned her professional reputation and how the presence of a girl of unknown origin could affect her career at the city's most prestigious law firm. Lily watched everything in silence, her big eyes alternating between the two adults who were discussing her fate as if she weren't present. The girl had spent the night in one of the guest rooms, the first safe roof she had known in months, and now she realized that this temporary security was being questioned by the elegant woman who spoke about her with barely disguised contempt. During the following days, the tension in the house increased exponentially. Kevin had hired a private doctor to examine Lily and discovered that in addition to malnutrition and recent burns, the girl showed signs of deep psychological trauma that manifested in constant nightmares and episodes of panic whenever she heard screams or saw fire. Dr. Helen Carver, an experienced pediatrician, explained that Lily would need specialized medical and psychological follow-up for a long period to fully recover from the traumas she had experienced on the streets. Ashley used this information as ammunition to pressure Kevin even more, arguing that they had neither the structure nor the knowledge to deal with a traumatized child, especially when their own lives were in crisis due to the company's financial problems. She even went so far as to research orphanages in the area and present options to Kevin, insisting that it would be better for everyone if Lily were placed in a specialized institution. During these first weeks, something extraordinary began to reveal itself about Lily. The girl demonstrated a surprising photographic memory, remembering specific details about people she had seen on the streets, places where she had slept, conversations she had heard during her months of life on the streets of Savannah. When Kevin showed her some photos of Tony that he kept in his office, Lily immediately recognized him and began to tell disturbing details about a man who corresponded exactly to the description of his ex-partner. According to the girl, she had seen that man several times at the city's bus terminal, always accompanied by other well-dressed men, carrying large suitcases and talking on the phone in nervous tones. The information provided by Lily began to form a very different picture from the official version of Tony's fate. The girl accurately described clothes he wore, scars on his hands that only Kevin knew about, specific mannerisms that unequivocally confirmed that it was the same person. Even more disturbing, Lily mentioned hearing the man talking about hidden money and needing to leave town before someone discovered something important. These revelations left Kevin in a state of shock, realizing that he had been deceived in a much more elaborate way than he imagined. While processing this devastating information, the construction company's financial problems continued to worsen. The loan sharks had increased the pressure, appearing at company construction sites and intimidating employees, forcing Kevin to hire private security that consumed even more of his already limited resources. He had begun to sell personal properties to honor debts that weren't his, watching his wealth accumulated over years of hard work gradually disappear. Ashley took advantage of this deteriorated financial situation to intensify her campaign against Lily, claiming that every dollar spent on the girl was money that would be lacking to solve the company's real problems. She began to make veiled threats about ending the engagement if Kevin didn't make a rational decision about the child's situation. The psychological pressure was immense, especially because Kevin knew he needed Ashley and her contacts in the legal world to deal with the legal issues related to the construction company and the debts left by Tony. During this turbulent period, Lily developed a deep attachment to Kevin, following him around the house like a silent shadow and showing touching gratitude for every small kindness she received. She had begun to call him Daddy Kevin, an affectionate term that melted the businessman's heart but deeply irritated Ashley. The girl also showed signs of gradual physical improvement, gaining weight with regular food and having her burns treated properly. But the psychological traumas remained evident in her nocturnal episodes of terror. One night, during one of these particularly intense episodes, Lily woke up screaming and clung to Kevin with despair, mumbling confused words about fire, bad men, and a woman who took care of her before everything went bad. In that moment of vulnerability, more details about her past began to emerge, creating an emotional puzzle that Kevin couldn't completely solve. The girl mentioned a lady named Rose who took care of her, a small house near the central market, and mainly a younger woman who visited her sometimes and who she called Mommy, but who had stopped appearing a long time ago. These fragments of memory suggested that Lily had a more complex story than simply being an abandoned child on the streets, and Kevin began to suspect that there were deeper connections between the girl's past and his own life that he hadn't yet discovered. The discovery that would change everything happened on a Tuesday morning when Kevin decided to investigate more deeply Lily's fragmented memories about her past. He had taken the girl to the central market of Savannah, hoping that the familiar places could awaken more memories about the mysterious Rose and about the woman she called Mommy. While walking between the fruit and vegetable stalls, Lily suddenly stopped in front of a small diner and pointed to the second floor of the building next door, mumbling that that was where the house where she lived before going to the streets was located. The owner of the diner, a middle-aged man named Tony, immediately recognized the girl when Kevin asked about her. With tears in his eyes, he said that Lily had lived in the small apartment with Rose, an elderly lady who did sewing to support the two, but who had passed away of natural causes about 6 months ago. Even more shocking was when Tony mentioned that before that, a young woman regularly visited the girl, always very nervous and scared, until she simply stopped appearing. According to him, this woman was called Marcia and worked as a cleaner in some office in the city center, always talking about having discovered something dangerous at work. The mention of the name Marcia made Kevin's heart race uncontrollably, as he perfectly remembered an employee with that name who had worked cleaning at Sterling Construction a few years ago. Marcia Santos was a dedicated and silent woman, who always arrived early and left late, but who had suddenly resigned abruptly, citing urgent personal problems. At the time, Kevin was so absorbed with business and with the growing problems in his relationship that he hadn't paid much attention to the employee's sudden departure. Now, with the pieces of the puzzle fitting together in a terrifying way, he realized that Lily was the daughter of Marcia, his former employee, and that there was a direct connection between the mother's disappearance and the current problems with Tony. Back at the mansion, Kevin frantically searched through the company's old files until he found Marcia Santos's file, confirming his worst fears. The employee had worked at the construction company during exactly the period in which Tony began developing the fraudulent schemes that would later cause so many problems. As responsible for cleaning the offices, Marcia had access to all the documents and conversations that took place in the company, possibly discovering compromising information about her partner's illicit activities. The guilt Kevin felt at that moment was overwhelming, realizing that a dedicated employee had tried to warn him about irregularities in the company, but he was too busy with his own problems to pay attention. Meanwhile, Ashley intensified her psychological pressure, even presenting legal documents from state-run foster care facilities where Lily could be placed. She argued that the construction company's financial situation did not allow for additional expenses with a child who was not their responsibility, especially considering that the loan sharks continued to threaten to collect Tony's debt through increasingly violent methods. The lawyer had begun to work behind the scenes, contacting social workers and claiming that Kevin did not have the psychological or financial conditions to adequately care for a traumatized girl. During this period of extreme pressure, Lily continued to provide valuable information about Tony through her photographic memories. The girl described with precise details conversations she had heard between the ex-partner and unknown men at the bus terminal, including mentions of bank accounts in upstate Georgia and plans to transfer large sums of money abroad. Even more disturbing, she remembered hearing Tony talking about important documents he needed to retrieve before permanently leaving the country, documents that were hidden somewhere only he knew. This information led Kevin to a deeper investigation of the construction company's financial records, where he discovered evidence of systematic overbilling in public works projects in the region. Tony had been diverting resources from government contracts for years, using the company as a front for corruption schemes involving local public officials. The amount of the diversions was astronomical, representing a fortune in fraudulent investments that explained how his ex-partner had accumulated enough capital to bribe loan sharks and finance his escape. The pressure from creditors intensified when they discovered that Kevin was investigating Tony's whereabouts, interpreting this as an attempt to recover money that should be used to pay off the outstanding debts. The men reappeared at his construction sites, this time not only intimidating employees, but also damaging equipment and delaying schedules, causing additional losses that consumed even more of the company's already scarce resources. Kevin was forced to lay off more than half of his employees and sell commercial properties that had taken years to acquire, watching his wealth built with so much effort gradually disappear to pay debts that weren't his. During a particularly difficult night, when Lily had another episode of nightmares related to the traumas she had experienced, she revealed more disturbing details about her mother Marcia's last days. The girl remembered whispered conversations between Marcia and Rose about dangerous men who were looking for her, about important papers she had hidden somewhere safe, and about the need to protect Lily from people who could hurt her. These memories suggested that Marcia hadn't simply disappeared, but had been forced to flee the city after discovering compromising information about Tony's activities at the construction company. The most shocking revelation came when Lily, in a therapy session with the child psychologist Kevin had hired, drew a detailed map of the places where she had seen Tony during her months on the streets. The drawing showed with surprising accuracy specific locations in Savannah, and even a route that led out of the city towards the Florida border. The girl had observed and memorized Tony's movement patterns with an acuity that impressed even the professionals who treated her, providing valuable clues that could finally lead to the whereabouts of the man who had destroyed so many lives. Ashley, realizing that the information provided by Lily could be the key to solving Kevin's financial problems, temporarily changed strategy, suggesting that they should use the girl to locate Tony before getting rid of her for good. This cynical proposal to exploit a traumatized child for personal gain revealed a side of Ashley that deeply shocked Kevin, making him question for the first time the true nature of the relationship he had maintained with his fiancée for so many years. The journey to upstate Florida was a transformative experience for Kevin, who decided to follow the clues provided by Lily about Tony's whereabouts, even against Ashley's vehement protests. The girl had drawn with impressive precision a map that led to a small town called Gainesville, where she remembered seeing the ex-partner talking to men in a hotel near the bus station. During the trip, Lily demonstrated surprising courage, helping Kevin identify specific places and people who might have information about Tony, her photographic memory serving as an unfailing guide through the dusty roads of rural Florida. When they finally found Tony in a small apartment on the outskirts of Gainesville, living under a false identity and planning his final escape abroad, the confrontation was even more revealing than Kevin had imagined. His ex-partner showed no surprise at seeing them, as if he had been expecting this moment to come sooner or later. With disturbing cynicism, Tony confirmed all suspicions about the embezzlement of money from the construction company, but made an accusation that shook Kevin deeply. He claimed that the businessman had always known about the fraudulent schemes and pretended ignorance to keep his hands seemingly clean, benefiting from the profits without taking the risks. Kevin's vehement denial was met with bitter laughter from Tony, who presented documents and recordings that supposedly proved his ex-partner's involvement in the corruption schemes. During this tense discussion, Lily remained silent beside Kevin, but her big eyes watched every detail of the conversation, recording in her memory information that would prove crucial later. Tony also revealed disturbing details about Marcia's fate, confirming that the employee had discovered the fraudulent schemes and threatened to expose everything to the authorities, forcing him to take drastic measures to silence her. According to him, Marcia had been found lifeless in a neighboring city months after fleeing Savannah, leaving Lily completely orphaned and vulnerable on the streets. The revelation that he was indirectly responsible for the orphanhood of the girl who had saved his life awakened in Kevin an overwhelming guilt and an unwavering determination to do justice for both Marcia and her daughter. Back in Savannah, with enough evidence to locate at least part of the money embezzled by Tony, Kevin discovered that Ashley had taken advantage of his absence to articulate an even more sinister plan. The lawyer had contacted social workers, claiming that he had abandoned a traumatized child to pursue fantasies about lost money, and had already initiated legal proceedings to place Lily in a state-run orphanage. Even more shocking, she had used privileged information about the investigation to blackmail him, threatening to expose alleged irregularities in the conduct of the construction company's business if he didn't agree to get rid of the girl for good. During the final confrontation with Ashley in his office, Lily made a revelation that completely changed the course of the situation. The girl, with her exceptional photographic memory, remembered seeing Ashley talking to unknown men at the bus terminal months ago, around the same time that Tony was planning his escape. Even more disturbing, she recalled hearing the lawyer talking on the phone about controlling Kevin and taking control of the construction company's remaining assets as soon as they got married. The discovery that his own fiancée was involved in the schemes from the beginning, possibly working as an informant for Tony and planning a gradual takeover of his assets, represented the most devastating betrayal Kevin could imagine. Ashley, confronted with the evidence provided by Lily's impossible memory, finally revealed the complete truth about her participation in the fraudulent schemes. She had been initially hired by Tony to get close to Kevin and monitor his activities, ensuring that he didn't discover the embezzlement of money until it was too late to prevent the escape with the diverted capital. The years-long relationship had been an elaborate farce, a cold and calculated staging designed to keep Kevin distracted while his company was systematically looted from the inside. The lawyer also admitted to being responsible for discouraging Kevin from investigating the construction company's financial problems more deeply, always suggesting solutions that actually benefited Tony's schemes. With all the truths exposed and his life completely destroyed by the betrayals of people he trusted, Kevin made the most important decision of his existence. He definitively broke up with Ashley, initiated legal proceedings to recover at least part of the money embezzled through the information that Marcia had collected and that Lily unconsciously held in her extraordinary memory, and dedicated himself fully to rebuilding his life on completely different foundations. The recovery process was long and painful, but gradually Kevin managed to gather enough evidence to recover a significant portion of the diverted resources, allowing him to pay off the debts with the loan sharks and restart the business on a smaller but more honest scale. 6 months later, the transformation in their lives was impressive. Kevin had sold the luxurious mansion and moved with Lily to a simple but cozy house on the outskirts of Savannah, where he worked as an independent consultant, helping small local contractors develop their businesses ethically and sustainably. His fortune had decreased considerably, but for the first time in years, he felt genuinely happy and at peace with himself. Lily, who had been officially adopted by Kevin after a complex legal process, attended a special school for children with special needs, where her exceptional abilities were recognized and developed appropriately. The girl had transformed into a cheerful and confident child, her traumas gradually being overcome through specialized therapy and, mainly, the unconditional love she found in her new family. Her burns had healed completely, but the emotional scars of life on the streets were replaced by happy memories of afternoons playing in the backyard, helping Kevin with small construction projects, and drawing birds that now flew free in her drawings, symbolizing the freedom she had finally found. During the silent nights in her new home, when Kevin watched Lily sleeping peacefully in her room decorated with drawings of colorful birds, he reflected on how a tragedy had turned into the greatest blessing of his life. The girl who had saved his life in that alley in Savannah had not only protected him from physical fire, but had also freed him from a much more destructive emotional fire, an empty existence based on superficial wealth, false relationships, and ambitions that consumed his humanity. Now, with his modest but honest income, his simple investments in shares of local companies, and his life dedicated to building a better future for Lily, Kevin had discovered that true fortune was not measured in dollars or accumulated assets, but in the ability to genuinely love and be loved in return. The courage of a 4-year-old girl had saved not only his life, but his soul, teaching him that the greatest treasures of human existence cannot be bought, only conquered through courageous choices and true love. If you like this wonderful story, please comment giving a score from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.